You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Allied reinforcements have arrived from the west.
Incoming transmission.
You're listening to the HoloNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. The new conservative resistance begins right here, right now.
HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network. The Millennial Conservative Resistance begins here.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, the new Millennial Conservative Resistance does indeed begin right here, right now, with you. You're listening to the HoloNet podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network. From Phoenix, Arizona, I'm your host, Matt Holloway, not completely back to my normal, vocally bombastic self just yet. Due to either a combination of allergies or a cold that just will not go away, but had to jump in because this week took a rather radical shift from absolutely nothing going on in the news to holy jumping balls with absolutely nothing in between. I mean, just within the last few hours, we've seen Russian military units engaging the Ukrainians in the Black Sea. We've had a border rush attempt at the San Ysidro point of entry in Southern California. We've had notable congressmen Kamala Harris, Cory Booker debating basic income plans in Congress. And U.S. border agents are firing tear gas over the borderline. Excuse me, guys, if I'm not quick enough on the cough button. I mentioned that cold I'm going through right now. But these are the kind of things that require an immediate response, that require us to sit up and pay attention. I know last week we did not have a HoloNet podcast due to my illness, although I managed to squeeze in a Defenders of American Exceptionalism episode right before that, so make sure you give that a listen if you have the opportunity. But we have to jump in, and we're going to do that right now. First, we're going to start with Fox News. Russian military fires on Ukrainian vessels in the Black Sea, according to the Ukraine. Russia's military opened fire on 3 Ukrainian vessels, seizing 2 naval artillery boats in the Black Sea off the coast of the Crimean Peninsula Sunday, Ukraine's military said, escalating tensions in the disputed region. Ukraine's Navy said Russian Coast Guard crews boarded the 2 artillery boats and a tugboat and seized the 2 larger vessels. The Navy also said that 2 crew members were wounded, though their conditions were not immediately known. Earlier Sunday, Russia and Ukraine traded accusations over another incident involving the same 3 vessels. The incident began after a Ukrainian Navy claimed a Russian Coast Guard vessel rammed the tugboat, which was escorting the artillery boats from Odessa on the Black Sea to Mariupol on the Sea of Azov via the Kerch Strait. Russian Coast Guard vessels, this is quoting, carried out openly aggressive actions against Ukrainian Navy ships, the Ukrainian Navy statement said. It said the Russian ship damaged the tugboat's engine, hull, side railing, and lifeboat. The statement added that Russia had been informed in advance about the planned journey. Russia then blocked off the strait. Now, if you haven't been paying attention to the geopolitics around Crimea and the Black Sea over the course of the last 2 years, little history lesson here. Back during the days of the Obama administration, Russia seized the Crimean Peninsula. There's no better way to say it. They hostilely took it over under the auspices, the thinly veiled veneer of a public plebiscite, stating that the people of Crimea wanted to join Russia. Similar movements, abortive movements, took place in the cities of Donetsk and Luhansk in eastern Ukraine. Those were largely unsuccessful. Though the insurgents were backed by Russian military forces, they were not successfully able to shake off the Ukrainian military. But the Russians were able to get away with Crimea, which is really what they wanted. Russia wants to completely reabsorb Ukraine, make no mistake. They view that Ukraine splitting off as an independent nation following the 1991 dissolution of the Soviet Union is one of the greatest tragedies in modern history, paraphrasing Vladimir Putin himself. But this represents a bold new move of the Russian military to again openly challenge Ukrainian forces, this time at sea. And we have a much different president in play. We have President Donald Trump sitting in the White House as opposed to President Barack. What red line are you talking about, Obama? So the question is now, how will the White House respond to this latest Russian aggression, Russia being a perceived weak spot in the president's foreign policy? So the story goes on to say, the Kerch Strait is the only passage into the Sea of Azov. The strait is crossed by the recently completed Kerch Bridge, which connects Crimea to Russia. Transit under the bridge has been blocked by a tanker ship. Dozens of cargo ships awaiting passage are stuck. Russia has not given any indication of how long it will keep the strait blocked off, but long-term closure to civilian traffic would amount to an economic blockade of Ukrainian cities on the Azov coast. In addition, the Black Sea's Russia's Black Sea Fleet greatly outmatches the Ukrainian Navy. Ukrainian cities in the Sea of Azov include strategically vital centers such as Mariupol, the closest government-controlled city to Donetsk and Luhansk, the breakaway regions of eastern Ukraine controlled by Russian-backed separatists. The Russian Federal Security Service, known as the FSB, said in a statement that there is irrefutable evidence that Kiev, or the Ukrainians, prepared and orchestrated provocations in the Black Sea. These materials will soon be made public. A Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman, Maria Zakharova, said on Facebook that the incident was characteristic of Ukrainian behavior: provoke, pressure, and blame for aggression. Though a 2003 treaty designates the Kerch Strait and the Sea of Azov as shared territorial waters, Russia has been asserting greater control over the passage since 2015. Ukraine's foreign ministry said in a statement that the Russians have transgressed all boundaries and become aggressive, and demand clear reaction of the international community. We consider such aggressive actions as violations of the norms of the UN Charter and the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. The statement went on, Ukraine will take all appropriate measures to ensure a diplomatic and legal response. In other words, they can't do anything about this militarily, and they're calling on the rest of the world to respond. And the United States does have a treaty obligation to defend Ukraine. This is a treaty obligation that was abrogated during the Obama administration, when absolutely no response was made to Russian aggression and the seizure of Crimea, despite treaty obligation dating back to 1991 that the United States would uphold the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the Ukraine. So the question is now, how will President Trump respond? Will there be a resounding silence from the White House? Will there be saber rattling? Or will we see an execution of retaliatory force much like we saw in Syria? I sense that to be less likely, because in order to appropriately respond to this aggression, the president would need to directly assault Russian forces, which differs significantly and puts us on an entirely different level than the Syrian conflict. It's one thing to launch cruise missiles at a base where Russian troops may be. There's a level of plausible deniability there. It is far be it another to actually launch a retaliatory strike against the Russian Black Sea Fleet, or to surgically insert forces to recapture those Ukrainian ships. But if President Trump fails to respond, will Vladimir Putin take this as now license and carte blanche for him to continue unrestricted aggression against the Ukrainian people? Now is the time to be concerned. Now, I grew up back east in a small town that had a very large, very proud Ukrainian population. Very proud Polak population as well. A lot of Polish people there. These people remember Soviet aggression. These people remember and are on guard against it. We have forgotten as a nation who we are dealing with when we talk about Russia. And it's so funny. Even you talk to the GOP now, and even they don't sense Russia as so great a threat. There are a lot of people on the right who actually like Russia better than we like our own countrymen right now, which is pretty staggering. If you would rather look to Vladimir Putin than to DNC congressmen and women, then we have a bigger problem in this country. And Vladimir Putin is the type of leader who will seize upon that advantage. Right now, America is fractured and we are weak. We are so internally divided. We are so broken within that Russia is now testing the waters. This should be a wake-up call to all of us, to everybody on the right and left, that Putin's knocking at the door now. He's pushing his boundaries. He's seeing how much he can get away with, how far he can push, how far President Trump will let him go. Because, make no mistake, to the people on the left, there is no correct answer. There is nothing that President Trump can do that will not backfire on him politically right now. He comes out hard against Russia, he's a warmonger. And he's a threat to peace, and he's off his nut, and he's going to get us into World War III. He's soft on Russia, it's Russian collusion. There's absolutely nothing the president can do here that will be right to the people on the left. Because they've taken the bar-none stance that everything this president does is wrong. That everything he touches is evil. And this is where we find ourselves going into 2019. So, this November, actually it's going to be this January now, it'll be 2 years. 2 years that I've been doing the HoloNet podcast. I know I've got I'm looking at the Facebook Live right now, and I've got the Aliens guy hair right now, which is kind of funny. And, studio headphones will do that to you. But it's been 2 years I've been doing this HoloNet podcast, and I've been writing on the holonet.com and lanterns.buzz. And it hasn't gotten any better. The division in this country has actually gotten worse. It's gotten to be that there is nothing President Trump could ever possibly do which will gain the approval of people on the left. And there is absolutely nothing that people on the left can do that will gain the approval of those of us on the right. We're going to talk about that and talk about some common sense seeming to prevail when we come back from this quick break. If you want to follow the conversation, participate online, we're at facebook.com/HoloNet. We're on Facebook Live right now. You can tweet at the HoloNet. Also find us on BitChute, YouTube, TuneIn, iHeart, iTunes, everywhere great podcasts are found. You're listening to the HoloNet podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network. Stick around.
people coming together not for divisiveness of party or for dichotomy of thought, but for unity in principle. And the principles that founded our nation, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Today, ladies and gentlemen, those principles are under the sternest attack that we have seen in many generations. It has become a crime in this nation nearly to express a difference in opinion from what is held by your party to be doctrine, from what is purported by the media to be truth. We have an opportunity to reach out to our fellow Americans regardless of their creed and regardless of their political inclinations, and unite as Americans, not as Republicans or as Democrats, as liberals or conservatives, but to unite around the principles that have guided this nation so well. I've covered a lot of stories, but the story that remains untold is the story of America in the 21st century, when we choose to turn back the tide against progressive socialism, when we choose to embrace the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and the Bill of Rights, when we remember what it is to be Americans. And that principle will not die as long as there's one man, one woman, one child who looks defiantly into the night and says, I am free.
You're listening to the HoloNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. The new conservative resistance begins right here, right now.
Allied reinforcements have arrived from the west.
You're listening to the HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network. The Millennial Conservative Resistance begins here.
Back. You're listening to the HoloNet podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network from Phoenix, Arizona. I'm Matt Holloway. And Thanksgiving passed this past week. I had Thanksgiving dinner with my family out in Tonopah, Arizona, and had some festivities out here as well. And, you know, we have to reflect and ask ourselves what we're thankful for. I'm thankful for all of the HoloNet fans and, HoloNet operatives on Patreon who are helping support this show every single day. You're watching, you're listening, liking, sharing, posting, everything that you do. You know, if you're able to contribute through the Patreon, that's fantastic. If you're interested in doing that, by the way, that's patreon.com/theholonet. Let me just make sure real quick that I have that correct. Yeah, patreon.com/theholonet. You can become a patron for as little as $1 a day. But it goes a long way toward helping with the show, and you become a HoloNet operative and a member of the new Millennial Conservative Resistance, so make sure you check that out. You know what I'm thankful for today? I'm thankful for the Heritage Foundation. Hashtag not a sponsor. The Heritage Foundation does not sponsor the HoloNet podcast, but I'm thankful that they're actually ringing the alarm bells for the latest cycle of insanity to come from Kamala Harris and Cory Booker. Their basic income plans, which are likely to remove work incentive, according to the Heritage Foundation think tank. And many people on the left are a bit surprised by that when folks on the right said, well, no, Sherlock, of course, giving people an unlimited personal income at the behest of the government is going to remove their work ethic. Do you think you would work if you just collected a check for breathing? With no conditions? 2 Democrats in the U.S. Senate, sorry, I said congressmen before, I meant senators, both said to be eyeing the party's 2020 presidential nomination. Pause real quick. Please, God. Please. Please. Cory Booker for president 2020. That will be the most amazing election to watch. Trump will annihilate that guy. Anyway. They recently announced so-called basic income plans for America's lower-income families. A liberal publication, meanwhile, says neither plan goes far enough to aid families, and the government should instead just start, quote, writing them checks. But the Heritage Foundation argues that such plans tend to fail, in part because they tend to remove the incentive to work. In October, Senator Kamala Harris from California unveiled her Lift the Middle Class Act. It would provide a tax credit of up to $6,000 a year for families earning less than $100,000 a year, and a credit of up to $3,000 for those earning less than $50,000 a year. So, if you make less than $50,000 a year, you would be bringing in a $9,000 credit. Boy, isn't that nice? Except for the fact that you realize that your grandkids are going to be paying for that. Your children and your grandchildren. Excuse my cough. She said, middle-class families deserve to know that one unexpected cost won't lead to financial emergency, she tweeted when the plan was unveiled. The Lift the Middle Class Act that I introduced would help address the rising costs of housing, tuition, childcare, and more. But the nonpartisan Tax Policy Center estimated earlier this month that Harris's plan would add $2.8 trillion to the federal deficit over its first decade and add another $3.4 billion over its second decade, the Washington Post reported. Harris proposed paying for her plan by canceling parts of the Republican Party's tax cuts and charging a new tax on banks and other financial institutions, the report said. So, here's a concept. How about we just cut government spending on a massive scale and then cut taxes even further so that way they don't have to give the money back? Just food for thought. Meanwhile, Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey proposed last month the creation of opportunity accounts for the nation's children, which could grow by about $46,000 per child by the time they turn 18. Today, nearly 1 in 3 American families have zero to negative wealth, and it's hard to get ahead if you begin life behind the starting line. Really? How do you have negative wealth out of the gate? Because, hang on, I get it. Let's say my parents grow up broke. How do I have negative wealth at age 18? How's that work out? Oh, student loans? Here's a thought. Don't take one. Don't take student loans. Go out and get a job. Work your way up. If you qualify for them, get scholarships. Scholarships are a good idea. Don't take the loan money. Tell Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to take their check, turn it sideways, and shove it directly up there. Then you don't start out with negative numbers, Corey. But liberal publication The Nation claims both wealth distribution plans fall short. Harris's plan suffers from 2 problems, Bryce Covert writes in the publication. The first is who she leaves out. By matching only the income that poor families earn from work, it omits those who don't earn anything. The second problem on Harris's plan, he writes, is that she relies on giving money to families through the tax code, an opaque and complicated way of doing it. Covert then hails Booker's plan for sending money straight to the people who need it, but says it's mistimes the assistance providing it when youths reach adulthood, when most families are more economically stable. He suggests instead that both plans be set aside in favor of the Russell Sage Foundation researchers suggested that parents be sent at least $250 a month for each child, a plan which estimated to cost U.S. taxpayers $190 billion per year. Holy crap, they want to send us child support. Isn't that amazing? Just think, about 60 years ago, how under his Great Society, LBJ wanted to make himself America's daddy. And now, the government will be paying child support under this suggested plan of the Russell Sage Foundation. The government literally becomes daddy. So then I suppose you really don't need a man in the house, huh? It is like the welfare queen's dream come true right there. But the Heritage Foundation's Vijay Menon wrote last month that plans similar to these recent proposals have been tried before, only to fail. Menon writes that a negative income tax experiment ran in 6 states from 1968 to 1980, documented by Charles Murray, author of Losing Ground. He wrote that the negative income tax on reducing work was unambiguous and strong. He wrote that it was a misguided approach. He said if recipients lost their jobs during the experiment, they experienced significantly longer spells of unemployment compared with non-recipients. More than 2 months longer for husbands, almost a year longer for wives, and longer still for single mothers. Policies should be designed to reward work, not replace it. Therefore, a better alternative to the universal basic income would be to expand the earned income tax credit. I say I prefer my initial assessment here. Reduce government spending, and then further reduce the taxes. Because that's the part of the equation that Republicans seem to have completely lost, is that when you reduce the taxes, you also have to reduce the spending. Otherwise, you spend yourself into oblivion. So if we reduce the spending even further, then we can reduce the taxes even further. It's amazing. You just need to start hack and slashing the government until you get down to the key essentials, the barest minimums required under the Constitution of the United States. And speaking of those minimums required, how about that border? How about that border? We're going to head to the San Ysidro Port of Entry, located in Southern California, right after we take this quick break. You're listening to the HoloNet Podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network. Stick around. All right, you're listening to HoloNet Podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network. I'm your host, Matt Holloway. I am going to drop a little bit of wisdom on you today. We've made some big changes on the holonet.com, and you'll be able to find them right about down here in this region here, below all of our stories. And when you're reading a story on the holonet.com, boom, you've got our related products, which you can pick up. These are conservative tomes. These are the sources of our knowledge when it comes to the conservative movement here in the United States, and some of them are just good fun. You'll see here the Constitution of the State of Arizona. You can pick that up. Biopic on Ted Kennedy, Identity Crisis, the 2016 presidential campaign, Rules for Radicals Defeated, and Understanding the Arizona Constitution. Now, these are ads by Amazon. Full disclosure, when you purchase something off of Amazon.com on the HoloNet, that does go towards supporting our page, supporting our content. So please, make sure you check that out on the holonet.com. And now, here's the really cool part, our recommended reading list. Now, I posted this back on Facebook a while back, and here we have all the must-haves. The Constitution of the United States and the Federalist Papers, the Bible Promise Book, New World Translation of the Bible, and holy crap, Sean Hannity, Glenn Beck, Jerry Doyle, Ann Coulter, Bill O'Reilly, There's a lot of Beck on here. I read a lot of his stuff. Dinesh D'Souza, Greg Gutfeld, and of course Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. If you want to pick up any of these recommended books, you can do that on the holonet.com/p/Matt's reading list, or just go to the holonet.com, click recommended reading. Finally, to take on a little tour here to the special offers section on the holonet.com. We have a free trial from Audible. You get 2 free audiobooks. You can start your free month of Amazon Prime Video. You can download free Kindle reading app and get $3 towards your ebooks, or start your free trial, your free 30-day trial of Amazon Prime. That's right, the Holonet is now a member of the Amazon affiliate program. So please, if you want to check out any of those great services, go to holonet.com, click special offers, and get that today. That's on the holonet.com. Now back to the show.
Allied reinforcements have arrived from the west.
You're listening to the Holonet on Lanterns Media Network. The Millennial Conservative Resistance begins here.
From Phoenix, Arizona, I'm your host, Matt Holloway. Sorry for people on the video there. It took me a minute to kick my microphone back on. We go to a story on The Blaze right now, about 22 minutes old. U.S. agents fired tear gas at migrants attempting to breach the fence along the U.S.-Mexico border. U.S. agents fired tear gas at a group of migrants attempting to breach the fence along the U.S.-Mexico border on Sunday, according to published reports. The group was comprised of mostly men trying to breach the crossing between Tijuana and California. The Associated Press reported children were screaming and coughing in the mayhem. Honduran migrant Ana Zuniga, 23, told the news outlet she saw migrants open a small hole in the concertina wire at the gap on the Mexican side of the levee, at which point U.S. agents fired tear gas at them. She said, "We ran, but when you run, the gas asphyxiates you more." She said she carried her 3-year-old daughter, Valerie, in her arms. Millennial TV in Mexico showed images of migrants at the border attempting to jump over the fence. In contrast, shoppers strolled in and out of an outlet mall on the U.S. side. Earlier today, U.S. Border Patrol helicopters flew low overhead while other agents patrolled on foot along the wire fence separating the two countries. The Border Patrol office in San Diego wrote in Twitter that pedestrian crossings were suspended at the San Ysidro port of entry at the East and West facilities. President Donald Trump posted yet another warning on Twitter about the caravans in Mexico that are attempting to cross the border. Now, on Friday, Tijuana Mayor Juan Manuel Gestelum said his city of 1.6 million is facing a humanitarian crisis as it struggles to accommodate thousands of immigrants. Trump said the caravan is attempting to impose an invasion of the U.S. He also suggested terrorists could be traveling in the group. Published reports have previously stated that about 5,000 military personnel are at the border in anticipation of the caravan's arrival. Now, we go to some coverage on this from Fox News. It says hundreds of migrants try rushing toward the Californian port of entry as Trump threatens to close the entire border. It says that images have posted on social media show Central American caravan pushing past Mexican riot police and rushing the border at San Ysidro. Tear gas was fired, and President Trump said that troops stationed at the border would treat thrown rocks like firearms. That's kind of old news. But Fox News has confirmed early Sunday that through the organizer Pueblos Sin Fronteras, otherwise known as People Without Borders, the George Soros-backed migratory organ, the group leading and organizing the Central American caravan, that members of the caravan were planning to attempt to cross later today. Footage posted by ITV correspondent Emma Murphy showed several U.S. Border Patrol helicopters flying low overhead. Now, these were including air and marine agents. So, one video showed people pushing toward the border chanting, "Yes, we can." There was a dramatic escalation in the tension at the border. On Saturday, the first episode of caravan-related violence directed at U.S. authorities was reported by the U.S. Border Patrol here in Arizona as a 31-year-old Honduran man who apparently split off from the caravan threw rocks at agents and a helicopter after setting a tree on fire. Nice! They seem so peaceful, don't they? Now, there are rumors of a deal in the offing between the Mexican administration coming in under newly elected President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, which would agree migrants to stay in Mexico as a short-term solution while the U.S. considered their applications for asylum. However, the future Interior Minister, Olga Sanchez, has refuted that, saying there is no agreement of any sort between the incoming Mexican government and the U.S. government. So we're seeing right now online some images, and the Washington Post reported Saturday the Trump administration has won support from the Mexican president-elect's team for a plan dubbed, quote, Remain in Mexico. The newspaper quoted Sanchez saying, "For now, we have agreed to this policy of Remain in Mexico." Sanchez did not explain in the statement why the Washington Post had quoted her as saying there had been an agreement. So, San Diego right now is prepping for the worst of it. The mayor of Tijuana declared a humanitarian crisis, and we're going to get to a little bit more on that here. This is another story from the Blaze, bouncing back from the Fox story. In Tijuana, Mexico, some 5,000 migrants are in town, most gathered in a temporary shelter at the sports complex. Others all around town on pallets in the street, in sleeping bags, under overpasses and bridges and tents. They are there to cross the border. An estimated 2,000 additional immigrants are on the way. Mayor Juan Manuel Gastelum, quoted by President Trump for almost a week ago, saying his city was ill-prepared for the influx, Friday declared his town in a humanitarian crisis and is now seeking aid from the United Nations, which is very telling that the city of Tijuana is now going directly to the United Nations because the Mexican government literally has no help to give them. He says, they have categorically omitted and not complied with their legal obligations, referring to the Mexican government. So we're now asking them and international humanitarian groups to bring in and carry out humanitarian assistance. I will not compromise public services, he said. I will not spend Tijuanans' money. I will not bring Tijuana into debt now in the same way we haven't done these past 2 years. For years, and in particular the last few years, following the humanitarian disasters, not only to the south of Mexico, but in Haiti as well, Tijuana has had a steady influx of refugees and migrants, most seeking to cross into the United States at the Tijuana crossing. Because of the absence, the apathy, and the abandonment of the federal government, we are having to turn to international institutions like the UN. Jesus. Think about that statement. Because of the absence, the apathy, and the abandonment of the federal government, they have to turn to the UN. The city has spent $27,000 a day to shelter and care for the mostly Honduran immigrants. Now, Thursday teleconference, President Trump spoke to reporters. He warned that the U.S. may shut the whole border down to entry if the situation in Tijuana is deemed to be outside of the Mexican government's control. I believe based on that statement, the situation is now out of the Mexican government's control. The government of Tijuana itself has said, our government is not in control here. As a result, we have to go to the UN. So open and shut case. Now, besides the additional caravan of 2,000 people already headed toward Tijuana, more migrants have already gathered in the towns of Sonora and Mexicali. Sonora over the border from Arizona, Mexicali further to the east in California, east of San Ysidro. Edgar Corzo Sosa, Mexico's National Director of Human Rights, said that he would describe the conditions inside as still manageable and somewhat in order. But he said the temporary shelter was already well over capacity. So, our government, our president, had a constitutional mandate to protect the territorial sovereignty of the United States and to uphold the rights of American citizens. To uphold the rights of American citizens, not foreign nationals entering U.S. soil illegally. Full stop. The president is fully within his rights as President of the United States and Commander-in-Chief to prevent people from entering the nation illegally. He's upholding the law. He's executing the law as the executive of the United States. So what's the Ninth Circuit Court's problem here, huh? It's almost as if they want the president to fail. Because they do. And this is why it's important for us to come together each week just to talk about these developments, just to review this news, just to make sure we're all on board and we're all tuned in. Because this week, I'm not going to lie, I tuned out a bit. I really did. I did that Defenders of American Exceptionalism show last Saturday, rather. I had a lot of fun. The next day, I was sick as a dog. I'm still feeling it. I still had to mute myself 4, 5, 6 times just to cough. Damn allergies going straight to bronchitis. I got bronchitis. Ain't nobody got time for that. But it's so critical for us to stay tuned in and plugged in to the news that matters. Because scenes like this, where we cannot even manage our own border, where we cannot, without fracturing and disagreeing internally, decide what to do about people who are seeking to enter our country illegally, where this creates a massive row between the judicial and executive branches, we have shown the world that we are weak within, that we are fractured, and that we could be one crisis away from breaking all ties within this country with each other. We talk about, the cold civil war is upon us, and, what'll it take for the Second American Civil War? And realistically, we are one black swan moment away at any given point. That's what it feels like right now. Russia knows it. China knows it. The Saudis know it. Jamal Khashoggi? You think that's not a shot across the bow? That's not covert Saudi forces seeing what they can get away with now that the United States is not really minding the store? I'm reminded, I've been watching a lot of Winston Churchill lately. A whole lot. And Albert Finney stars in The Gathering Storm. And he has just an excellent reading, which I'm gonna play for you real quick. If I can get it to work. Bear with me. But he has an excellent reading on this, and I want you to think about it in the context of the United States' absence on the global stage right now. Just to put it in that context.
How dare they? Buggers! This is absolutely the worst thing of my whole bloody life. I'm surrounded by enemies. They call me a warmonger because I speak the blunt truth. Baldwin is behind all this, Stanley bloody Baldwin. No better than an epileptic corpse. Who is in charge of the clattering train? The axles creak and the couplings strain. The pace is hot and the points are near. And sleep has deadened the driver's ear. And the signals flash through the night in vain. For death is in charge of the clattering train.
Who is in charge of the clattering train? This is what happens when you have nearly a decade of an America who is foreign policy weak. Followed by a half decade where we are shattered domestically and we are more divided than we have ever been before. This is a backfire. So many of us were hoping that with Trump's ascent to the White House, that we would see a much stronger American foreign policy. When the president has had the opportunity to execute foreign policy as he sees fit, we have. but then he's hamstrung internally. And that leads to a big concern of a stab-in-the-back mentality. If you've never heard of the stab-in-the-back conspiracy, the stab-in-the-back conspiracy is what happened to Germany after Versailles in World War I. So many Germans believed that they hadn't really lost the war. So they believed that they had been stabbed in the back by their governments. And this was later inflamed by Hitler and the Nazis, where the German people believed they had been stabbed in the back by the Jewish establishment. What we could see soon is the American right believing that post a Trump failure or a foreign policy disaster, that we as a nation have been stabbed in the back by the leftists among us. Just the same as the German people believed after Versailles. The only question is, what shape will our Versailles take? And how will we react to believing we've been stabbed in the back and betrayed by our own? Will it be a conspiracy? Or will it be true? Do we have people on the left actively engineering the failure of the United States on a foreign policy level and on an international level? There are days I believe we do. There are days I believe we do. So, going into another year of the HoloNet podcast, this is our task. To remain on guard. To hold the line against the night. And to continue to call out these stories and these patterns when we see them. I'm not going to have time to pull up the soundbite right now, but there's a great line in V for Vendetta, if you have ever had the chance to look it up. I believe I played it here before, where Detective Finch, or Inspector Finch, sees everything laid out in a great sort of pattern. And the human mind is a pattern recognition filter. When you read as much history as I have, you start to see patterns in the timeline. And things never match entirely. You know, I'm no prophet. I'm not about to jump up on my soapbox and scream the world is ending. But you have to note that there are certain patterns and certain equal and opposite reactions. And when America is internally divided, our foreign policy presence suffers. And in that power vacuum, other nations step in. And we see Russia, as I said, testing the waters and now militarily engaging the Ukraine on the Black Sea. We see Chinese territorial pressing in the South China Sea unabating. And we see the Saudis slaughtering a journalist inside their embassy with impunity. Tell you what, I'd be real nervous to live in Ukraine right now. Real nervous to live in the Baltics. Or Poland. Or anywhere else that neo-Soviets and Russian revanchists might set their eye upon next. Because I'm betting Putin feels pretty strong right now. And feels that he won't be challenged any further. Now, I want to end the show kind of on a silly note, on a kind of silly, stupid note. And I saw this story, and I facepalmed pretty hard, and I think you'll join me in a good laugh. Pennsylvania woman claims she drove on the train tracks because GPS told her to go that way. If your GPS told you to drive on train tracks, would you do it? Around 10 p.m. last Wednesday, the Duquesne Police Department responded to a call about a vehicle on the railroad tracks off State Route 837, the department wrote in a Facebook post. Officers said a woman from Sewickley roughly 15 miles northwest of Pittsburgh, had driven onto the tracks because her GPS advised her to go this way. The female was 100% sober, had no medical conditions affecting her decision-making. The woman's vehicle was towed from the tracks, and she was cited for careless driving. And there's a picture of the car right there on Fox. So on the one hand, I say how we need to pay attention to these events that are happening around the world, when apparently some of us are so wrapped up in our lives, in our minutiae, in our individual bullshit, that when the annoying voice, mine's British on my phone, by the way, says, right turn ahead, we just do it? Onto railroad tracks? Seriously? Are you kidding me with this crap? So, right turn ahead. Okay. That wasn't a clue? You're on railroad tracks. Wasn't there one like a couple years ago where somebody drove off a dock straight into the water because Google said to? I think Google was advising them to take a ferry. So at least that, has some explainability. This is just... Come on, man. Come on. You're killing me, Smalls. Is this what we've become as a society? We're going to turn off the road and onto the railroad tracks because that's what the mainstream media is reporting. That's what our political talking heads are telling us. That we need to kick in that universal basic income, start redistributing our wealth. People's work ethics be damned because that's the best thing to do because they're smarter than you. They're the GPS that's going to drive you off the rails. Or should I say onto the rails? Is this who we are as an American people? We'll be led around by the nose by our collective GPS. Until the light at the end of your tunnel is a freight train coming your way. As I rip off song lyrics from the 90s. Boy, oh boy. Well, folks, I'm back. Might have to mute to cough every couple of seconds here, but dang it, that's what we're going to do if we must. Because we must. Because somebody's got to hold the line against the night, and I'm damn glad you're here doing it with me. So, from Phoenix, good night. God bless you. God bless the United States of America. Good night, everybody.
You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.